We made it! The last day of Artober. And as the last day, I'm going to go through all of the works I've made up until this point and compile them into this one video. If you are just now coming by, I explain how this works in my earlier videos, and you can check those out down in the description. Otherwise, let's get started. On the first day, I randomized my own list, and I think I tried to be a little too ambitious. The prompt was microphone, and I really wanted to do a cool heat-treated metallic old-timey kind of mic, but yeah, I wasn't satisfied with it. I think if it hadn't been inked first, maybe it would have looked cooler, but the colors clashed a little too much for me. So instead, I started over and drew a singer with, a microphone. I'm pretty proud of the expression I got with their face though. And surprisingly, the page held up well to the marker onslaught. Day 2, I was more straightforward and drew a girl with an axe rather than just the axe itself. This was the only day I used watercolor pencils, and I think you can see why. Day 3 was ARTOBER's carvings prompt, which I just used regular colored pencils for. I fell back on my favorite thing to draw, but I don't think the color scheme I was given helped it look much like a carving. It was really fun though, so I digitized it and thought it looked really cool. I added it to my Redbubble shop that's linked down below. Day 4 was my own list again. The prompt was return. This one is one of my favorites, and I think it came out great, with the exception of the streaky skin tone color. It's my first side profile in a while though, and I will celebrate that. Followed by day 5, which I feel is one of my worst. The fine liners weren't exactly great for illustration, and that was my bad. So I ended up doing a digital version for the sword prompt many/multiple, but forgot to use the assigned color palette. Day 6 was definitely the most fun. I used my D&D dice to generate a fantasy map by rolling them on the paper and drawing around the dice according to a key. D20s were cities, D10s were farms, D8s were forests, D6s were mountains, D12s were rivers, and D4s were lakes. The colors weren't really map colors, but I still enjoyed it a lot. Day 7 was my first full body piece, and I think this one was also one of my favorites. The pose came pretty easily, the proportions not so much, but I think it worked out in the end. The dress was a lot of fun to draw in color, and it might have overshadowed the actual sword prompt, but I'm proud of it. Day 8 was the next Swordtober prompt, Wicked Apothecary, and I think the color scheme really lends itself here. This one was meant to be digital from the start because I didn't have a great way of recreating the color scheme with my traditional materials. It was great lighting and perspective practice, and I had a lot of fun with the details. Day 9, I combined full body and side profile, and I have mixed feelings about this piece. If I were to do it again, I wouldn't have used the blue for her skin. I would have left it as the tone of the paper. I think the jean shorts came out great, but the rest I'm kinda meh on. The face especially. From far away it's fine, but it just looks off to me. Day 10, I also kept entirely digital. It was a Swordtober prompt beverage. I have a similar jar-based piece without a straw. I tried to recreate a similar vibe, but I think I need to take out the straw. The straw makes it weird. Another digital piece for day 11, and I think you can guess the prompt. It's bats. I saw people making their own washi tape designs, and I wanted to try it for myself. I need to edit the mountains so that it can loop seamlessly, but I still really like this one. Now, day 12 I didn't do a video for, and I think you can see why. I wasn't having fun with it, and I was getting really lazy with rendering. I did end up making a separate version with just block colors, but I still wasn't happy with it. The prompt was Justice, by the way, and yeah, it wasn't working for me. But I'm showing it to prove that I did technically do this day's prompt. Day 13 was almost another prompt gone wrong. The prompt from Swordtober was jewelry, and I used one of my old pendants as a reference. I tried to make it larger, but it came out super wonky, and the colors didn't help at all, so instead, I inked and colored the initial sketch that I made, and I like it so much better. Day 14 was a sword prompt, Cursed Relic. I went through a couple different designs, but wasn't entirely sure about any of them until I stuck the sword in a rock and remembered a cursed sword my D&D group found, and also a separate item we found on an island in an underground lake, so I combined the two ideas and voila! The next day was the glowing sword prompt. I reused one of the sword sketches from the previous day and experimented with a couple poses. The one I stuck with was another side profile, and one of my favorites as well. Day 16 can also be called a disaster. I had just received new watercolor brush markers and a water brush, and I was really excited to use them, but the water brush was unfortunately leaky, and it destroyed my first attempt. I was happy with pieces of it, basically just the little baby dragon and the pommel, so I redid it with my markers, and I think the person came out better, though I forgot to add the dragon scales this time around. And the pommel came out weird. But at least I liked this attempt marginally better than the first one. I think day 17 just might be my favorite of the month. The prompt was mushroom, and I was inspired to make a tiny village out of different mushrooms. They were a lot of fun to sketch, and I was really determined to make these new watercolor brush pens work in my favor. I used a regular brush to spread water and pigment this time, and the cloudy watercolor effect really made everything look organic but also mystical. and Artez's Twitter account commented on this piece, which made my day. Day 18 went pretty quick. It was the Witchtober prompt tree, so I went with a tree in the shape of a person. I detailed the eye and the heart of the person while also trying to keep it organic. I used the same watercolor pens, just without water, since I was using my normal sketchbook and not watercolor paper. I skipped day 19 because at this point I was playing catch up, so let's skip to day 20. Ignore the sketch on the side, but day 20's sword prompt was rose/thorn, so I kept it pretty simple. I did add a green that wasn't part of the original color scheme, but I think it adds some much needed interest. The roses were actually the most fun part to draw in ink for me, and I like this one a lot. Day 21 was ARTOBER's Ancient Rituals prompt that I used fairly loosely. I'm not totally sure how I feel about it though. Day 22's prompt was pumpkin, so I went ahead and painted directly on a pumpkin, which I don't recommend by the way. Too sloped and curvy. That being said, I loved getting to paint my dog on a pumpkin. He's a purebred collie with a lot of pretty details in his markings, and painting his fur was super relaxing. Just ignore the background and the perspective. Day 23 was much shorter. I went with a full body side profile, but I scrunched them up and hid their face this time. Day 24 was the Witchtober prompt cat, and I had a lot of fun with this one. I think the concept is more my favorite than the result. It happened by accident because it wasn't supposed to have 4 ears, but I liked the idea of a demon cat with 4 ears, so I kept adding to it, and I like him a lot. His name is Henry. Days 25 and 26 were skipped because it was catch-up time once more. I technically didn't do day 27 either, but the prompt was despair, and I think a blank page encompasses that perfectly, so I'm counting it. Day 28 was the Witchtober prompt candle, which I kept pretty straightforward. Day 29 was the prompt break, so I broke up a wolf drawing because I am nothing if not predictable, and I skipped day 30 in order to prepare for today, the last day, which I'm going to just hop right into. Okay, look. This might not sound like much, but I've never talked this much in my life. Yes, that's an exaggeration, but not by a lot. I really don't talk much, and getting all these words out is triggering my asthma, so if I sound out of breath, you know why. Anyway, today I spun the wheel and it landed on Swordtober. This hasn't come up in a while, so I'm really glad it showed up for the last day. I randomized the day number and got day 17, which is the prompt Fragmented. I then flipped a coin and got tails for set B, and the random number I got was 3. It's basically a pastel, earthy set of colors. I started by sketching out a shattered, fragmented sword to get an idea of how it was supposed to look before I began sketching anything else, because the prompt is supposed to relate to the sword, you know? I guess it doesn't have to, but I wanted it to. I sort of borrowed a similar pose that I did for day 23, the full body hunched over pose, but this time I showed a face. I started really small to see if the general shape was something that I wanted to work with, and it was. So I went over to the next page and started practicing the side profile view of the person's face. I was having a hard time with this because the first attempt didn't come out great, so I erased it and tried again, and it sort of worked. It came out okay. I then attempted to draw it much larger, more to scale with how big an actual face would be, if that makes sense. I always have the hardest time drawing the bottom part of the nose and lips and chin. I mean, basically everything but the forehead, because the forehead is a simpler line to follow. I wanted to recreate a shocked face so that the lips were parted, which was a new thing for me to try. I think I was able to make it look relatively decent. It's not photorealism, but it wasn't exactly exaggerated or cartoonish like I usually do either, but it gave me something to go off of. Sort of satisfied with it, I went back to the pose and scaled it up a bit more to try and hammer out a few more details and proportions. I was worried about the hands and the arms, but I had faith in myself that I would get it right on the final piece of paper and sort of glossed over the details, which was what this sketch was meant for, but whatever. I'm a lazy artist, okay? So this was the very last page of this sketchbook. I was surprised, honestly, because I rarely finish sketchbooks. My high school sketchbook, I think I'll consider finished because it was meant for class, and I only had like 5 pages left by the time high school was over. Finishing it now would be a weird jump in time, and I prefer my sketchbooks more as a time capsule sort of thing, which means that I guess this is the second sketchbook I've ever finished. It doesn't sound like much considering the fact I've been drawing since I was old enough to hold a pencil, but I didn't really have sketchbooks until high school. When I was young, I just used a lot of printer paper and kept the drawings in a folder. Now that I have a few sketchbooks, I realize just how daunting they are. My normal sketchbook that I've been using, not this one, but the other one that's smaller and not spiral bound, I've had since 2017, and it's still not finished. It's almost there, but a lot of that progress came from this year alone. And you know exactly what I have to thank for that. So the fact that I've managed to finish this sketchbook is cause for personal celebration at least. It's my 5.5 by 8 mixed media book, and a few of the pages are just swatch pages for my heavier mediums like markers, watercolor, acrylic, which the paper held really well surprisingly, but it was also a lot of other works I'm proud of, and a lot of this month's finished prompts as well, including this one, which is a nice one to finish it off, I think. I keep going back to the hands to fix them up because I would ignore them to work on other sections like the sword or the hair or the shirt, clothing, anything else. But I do get them right in the end, as right as I am capable of at least. In my mind, I was thinking this girl was maybe an apprentice smither or fighter. Either way, she was handling one of her mentor's priceless ancient swords and she dropped it or pretended to fight with it and accidentally destroyed it in the process. I like the latter personally, since I drew her hair pulled back, which she would do if she were practicing with the weapon because no one wants hair in their face when they're fighting. It may look cool in movies, but that don't work when you can't see your opponent because your hair is whipping into your face and eyes all the time. Just a word of advice. You're welcome. I kept the outfit pretty simple. It's an outfit I tend to reuse a lot. A light flowy shirt and a sash to keep it tucked into the pants, and simple pants that may or may not be cuffed, depending on how I'm feeling that day. The perspective I used made the sword a little difficult to draw, but I think I managed. When it came to colors, I decided she would have a normal hair color. Unlike most of the other characters I've drawn this month, I had an easier time placing the colors for this piece, and none of the markers were bad, at least not for my standards. The Ottersloft ones were fine and still pretty juicy, which is a good thing considering they make up a majority of this piece. Shading I also kept simple. I just used the same color over the original to add some smaller, slighter shadows and left it at that. I think the face is a little hard to see from this distance, but I didn't go super detailed because I was worried I would lose a lot of the expression once I started inking. Still though, I think it came out how I wanted and I'm proud of it. Especially the hands. Go me. Anyway, that's it for day 31 and the final day of my Arttober challenge. I'm shocked I did as many days as I did. I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it every day, but the fact that I managed to complete 26 days is wild to me, especially since I filmed and uploaded almost every one. Last year's me wouldn't believe it for a second. I've rediscovered a lot of what I love about art, and though I'm probably not going to be drawing every day from now on, I think it shows I'm capable of more than I thought. Are they all my best works? No, not by far. But it was fun to experiment and see what I want to try more of. Thank you so much to those of you who've been around. I hope it was fun. I'll be taking 2 weeks off to get some real-life projects sorted and prepare new videos for the channel. And with that, remember to like the video if you enjoyed this and subscribe if you haven't already, and I hope to see you all again in the next video. Bye bye!